This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Tzadi Beis, and we're holding on Tzadi Beis Amid Aleph for the top line. Again, a tremendous thank you to all those that participated and made the Torah Anytime fundraiser, Baruch Hashem, a beautiful success. So we're holding the top line of Tzadi Beis Amid Aleph as we wrap up the previous Mishnah that says ubachamar keshehi bayrakas. When she unloads, that's when the chamar eats. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. She bayrakas mechan achla. When the donkey unloads, where's it eating from? So explains the Gemara, ema ad shetehi bayrakas. No, of course, that's what the Mishnah means. It doesn't mean as it's unloading. It means until it unloads. Tanila tanar rabbanon. A brayse that proves this point. Chamar v'kamala ichlin mimasay shal gabehem. They're allowed to eat from the load on their back. Ubelvlad shlayita biyata ve'achilim, as long as the owner does not take off and feed the animal. But the animal can eat from its own from the load that it is carrying. And we continue with the Mishnah, 6 lines down. Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph. Oichel poyel kishos afilu bedinar. A poyel is allowed to eat cucumbers, even if it's worth a dinar. Kaiseves, dates afilu bedinar. Rav Lazar Chasvaimer loyechal poyel yeser al schari. No, depends what the workers' wages are. You cannot eat more than your wages. The Chachamim matirim. The Chacham don't make such a differentiation. They say it's mutter. Aval, however, melandin is adam shloyi ravasan. We teach a person he shouldn't be a glutton. He shouldn't be crazy. Bifanav, and therefore we close the door. Bifanav. So Rashi over here points out that what's afilu b'dinar, even if these cucumbers, even if these dates are worth a dinner. Rav Lazar Chasma continued and said he should not eat more than scharai. Rashi points out that we're going to learn this out from Sukkim, and the Mishnah concluded the sheet of the Chachamim is it's mutter, but we teach him not to be a Rav, so we close the door. Meaning, if such a worker eats so much, no one's going to want to hire him in the future. So the Chachamim are saying that Ba'atzem, for all intents and purposes, the worker could do what he wants, but he's causing himself a problem. So says the Gemara, Chachamim Ainu Tanikama. The Avi is Kasha. Tanikama said it's mutter. Lazar Chasma came along and said, don't eat too much. Say the Chachamim it's mutter. Says the Gemara, the Chachamim is the Tanikama. Explains the Gemara, Ikbeinayu Avol Melamdim. The last line, L'Tanikama, less Melamdim. According to Tanikama, we don't teach him anything. The Rabbanan Islo Lemelandim. Ibai same a second teretz. Another din is different. The Ravasi. That's the chiluk between the Chachamim, the Hanikam, and the Chachamim. The Ravasi. Afilo sachar el libsar eshkol echad. You hire someone to pick one cluster. He's allowed to eat it. So the Tanakama would be holding like this din of Ravasi. Meaning, and that's what Tanakama says, you can eat a kishos afilu dinner. And on that, Chachamim are not necessarily agreeing. Says the Gemara, Utsricha. Now, why the Ravasi have to explain both of his dinim? But before we go there, let's just quickly see Rashi. Rashi really speaks out this nafkamina between Tanakam, the Chacham, and the Shita Ravasi. Says Rashi, about 8 lines down. Tanakama is lehu is le, le de Ravasi. There you go. Sorry, the Gemara shtickle disappeared. There we go. Tanakama is le de Ravasi. Says Rashi, Vachi Gamar. Levada. Not only that, afilu ishava dinar. That's what Tanakama is teaching us. Whether you hire just for it or something else, that's what Lazar Chas. V'asu Rabbana, the Chacham and the Mishnah, they teach us Basrai leMeimar Yoiser al Scharai Muter Hulechol. It's allowed more than just Schar. Im Sacharhu, ya Im Schar Yemu. He's a hired day worker. Aval Sachroi lehakishos levada. Then less lula Ravasi, and that's going to be the nafkamina. Tanakama is going to say afilu, even if it's worth a dinar, you hire for that one thing. And the Chacham and the Mishnah are saying no. It's true you could potentially eat more than you work, but that's only if you're hired as a day employee. However, if you're hired to do one item, then the Chachamim will hold that it does not work. You're not allowed to eat it. Says the Gemara, 8 lines into the Gemara, Sricha. Why do Rav Asi have to say both cases? Explains the Gemara. Diash minan hach kamaisa. If Rav Asi only said the first, then I would have thought mishum tolika lemeisav lekelev shel balabayis. I would have thought, you know why he can't eat the one cluster that he was hired to pick, because nothing is going into the vessel of the balabais. I would have thought Lisa Beresha Vader Lechel, put it in and then eat it. And if it only taught me the second case, I would have thought the Efshal Kayumi liver. So if I would have thought the worker could eat that one cluster that he picks, why? Because he could then do more work afterwards. He wasn't just hired for that one item of and therefore that's the reason why we needed both cases. So far, 2 tirutzim as to the chotin Tanakam and Rabbi Yosi. Teretz number 1 is Avol Malamdim. Teretz number 2 is Ikebenayu dir Rabbi Yosi. Says the Gemara, teretz number 3, Iba Yisema, another way of differentiating between Tanakam and Rabbi Yosi. Says the Gemara, about 13 lines into the Gemara. The first one is Dirav. Ikebenayu Dirav. Damarav Matzasim Megillah Starim. Bei Rav Chia, I found a hidden Megillah in the Yeshiva Rav Chia Vakasa Ba Isi ben Yehuda Omer. On this Megillah Starim, it was written that Isi ben Yehuda says in the Torah, Kitavai Bikerem Reach, says the pasuk when you come to the vineyard of your friend, Va'amar Bebias Kol Adam Hakasa Midaber. The pasuk is referring to any person coming in. V'amarav l'shavik isi chaye l'chol beria. Isi has not left anyone that could be able to live. No one's farmer is going to be able to survive if Isi is learning that what's the pasuk teaching me? The pasuk teach me that anyone is allowed to just come into someone else's field and eat as much as he wants. So Amar Rav Ashi, Amrita like Shemaitza Kamei de Rav Kana. I said over this din in front of Rav Kana. Dilma Baisim Besudasan. Maybe what's going on over here, the Avdu Va'achlu. Maybe when did Isi ben Yehuda say you can eat in someone else's field? Someone who works for the meal. And he meant to say that as you work, you could eat. Amar Li, Rav Kana said, Afilu Achi, even so. Person rather hire someone to harvest his stuff, and not everyone should come along and eat from it. So this din of Rav, this is going to be the nafkamina between the Tanakama and the Chachamim. And Rashi once again fills in the blanks that Tanakama doesn't hold to this din of Isi. Says Rashi, the Eichel Poyel Katani. For Rabbanan Basrai is laid the Isi Vachi Kamar Chachamim. The Chamar come along and saying Matir in Lecho Yoiser al Scharai. Why the Lav Sachir? The Lav Sachir, because it says Isi, even if you weren't hired, Achel, you're allowed to come to someone else's field, harvest, and eat to your heart's content. So 3 different ways of learning the nafkamina between Tanakama and the Chachamim in the Mishnah. Continues the Gemara about 15 lines from the medium-sized lines. Ibai Lahu asks the Gemara, Payal Mishalayhu Eichel, Ay Mishel Shamayim Hu Eichel. How or from what does a Payal eat? Does he partake of his own food or of Shamayim? Rashi says, is the fact that he's allowed to eat a sefes charu shesifulei Torah, the Torah added on, you hire a worker, you're obligated to give him meals. Or not that it's his wages, but rather it's a gemilas chasadim, like all other manasaniyim that you're supposed to give. Someone who needs food, you give him food. Says the Gemara, Lamai nafkamina. What's the difference? Either way, you got to feed the worker, like we're learning to Amar. Says the Gemara, you know what the nafkamina is? Someone says, Snula ishti ubana. If a worker says, give it to my wife and kids. So if it's part of his wages, so of course he's allowed to give it to his wife and kids. But if he's eating as an act of chesed, the Torah never said that you have to give his wife and kids such a chesed. So what is the halacha? A fundamental shayla we've been discussing, that which workers are allowed to eat, when they're allowed to eat, etc. So asks the Gemara, this obligation to give the workers a part of his wages, or is it a separate chesed? The difference being whether his kids will be able to be, his wife and kids, will they get the same wages? Says the Gemara, Tashima. Says our Mishnah, he gets part of his wages, Bizuza, you hire him for a sixth of a zuz, and you're going to pay him for a full zuz. Meaning, if it's part of his wages, it makes no sense. Says the Mishnah, he could even eat up to dinner. Why in the world is he eating so much? He could be hired for much less. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Still, it's the same problem. Safe. Even if it's a Mishal Shamayim, it's Gibilas Chasadim. You're giving him a chesed, you're giving him a meal worth so much more than the work that he's doing. Says the Gemara, what am I going to tell you? Rachmana zachile. Achinami rachmana zachile. What are you going to answer? You're going to answer that even if it's Mishal Shamayim, it must be Tzachos. The Torah said he gets it. So either way, I'll tell you the same thing. Maybe it's wages, and the Torah says he gets it. So no rayos. Tashematu lines on the medium sized lines of Lazar Chasma Imer. Lo yoichal para yoisal schara. Says the Mishnah Chacham Maitir in my lab. What is the machlekes? Tanakama. Lazar Chasma, and the Chachamim Demar Savar. Suggests the Gemara. And that's the reason why the worker cannot eat more than his wages. And Chamar Savar, in the first medium-sized line, say the Chachamim Yishal Shamayim Oichel. Therefore, he could eat more than his wages. Says the Gemara, no Rayo. The Kuli Alma Mishalayu Oichel. He's eating his own. As Rashi the Mishnah pointed out, though, what's the machlekes? Rav Lazar Chasma and the Chachamim. How you darshan of Kinav Chamar Savar. Rav Lazar Chasma holds bidavar marsav Kinav like your nefesh bidavar shemaisen nafshayalav, and therefore it's wages. Therefore, you can't eat more than that. A marsav Kinav Chaman Nafshachim Chasamta Potter, just like Kinav that which belongs to you. If you muzzle yourself, there's no malchus, it's your item. But says the Gemara, there's no raya from the machlekes of the Chasma and the Chachamim as to whether you're eating mishalai or mishel shamayim. Tashima, the Gemara tries again. Nazir shamar tinu leishti ubanai. If a Nazir says, give, the Nazir is harvested to work in a vineyard, grapes. Of course, the Nazir is not allowed to eat grapes and the like. So he says, give it to my wife and kids. Ein shaymim lai. If it's his own stuff, why wouldn't we listen to him? Of course, he's allowed to give away his wages to anyone who wants. Says the Gemara. Hasam, the reason over there we don't listen to him is for a different reason. Misham lech amrina nezira schar lekarmeloy sikrav. The special din by a Nazir, Gedarim, stay away. What are you doing? Taking grapes and feeding your family, that which you're not allowed to eat. That's the reason why, but it's nothing to do with whether it's his wages or whether it's Michel Shamayim. Tashema, the Gemara tries again. For workers says, give it to wife and kids. Ain't Shaimim in the first very one line. If it's his wages, why don't we listen to him? Says Gemara, my pile is a Nazir. Tanya Nazir, Tanya pile, two different prices. Says Gemara, who cares? Will they learn next to each other? Yeah, two different prices, two different names. It's not a kasha at all. Continues the Gemara. From where do we know? Regarding a worker who says, give it to my wife and kids, that we don't listen to him. Shenemar. Says the Pasuk, Val Kil Yecha Lo Yisitain. Do not put it into your vessel. V'chitei machan ami nazir. You tell me it's also about a nazir. Yachim misham lekilcha lo yisitei. Misham lech amin naziru. That's the reason why. So for the fact that it says that the reason you should not do this is because al kilcha lo yisitei, it seems it's not talking about a nazir. Says the Gemara, Einachanami. You're right. I think Tani Lashon Payal Kanasav Lakra the Payal. But really, says the Gemara, it is talking about a Nazir. And it could have said the pasuk of Lech Lech Amrina Nazira. Quote the other pasuk. Why? Because they use the word Payal. Tashemas, the Gemara is still trying to prove the worker. How does he get to eat? Mishalay or Mishal Shamayim. The last line of Sadi Beis Amid Aleph proves the Gemara. Seicher Zabayel Lake Soisteinim to dry out figs as we turn over to Sadi Beis Amid Beis. Hariza Ichlu Batam and Amaiser. The worker is allowed to eat and he's butter from Maiser. Amanashani Ubani. If someone says in condition that I and my son shall eat, or Shaichel Bini Bischari, or if a person says I want my son to eat as my wages. In either of those cases, hu oichel, he eats upater, and he's pater from giving meiser, but b'noyechel v'chai. So says the Gemara, v'yami shaloi oichel, eating from your own self, amai b'noyeh chayiv. Why would the son be obligated to give off meiser, just like he himself? He's entitled to this food, so it must be that it's mishal shamayim. Amar Ravina, no, that's not the reason. The reason is a different din, the Rabbanan, the Misham. It looks like he bought it, and that is the reason why the Rabbanan, we require him to take off the appropriate chumais and meiser. 6 lines down, Tashima, the Gemara continues to try to find a raya, whether Mishalay, Mishal Shamayim, Asecher Zapayel. So no hires our worker, last has been at the Ravai Shalai to work with his produce in the first 4 years, or he can't eat it. But if the employer did not tell him that the fruit was not the Ravai, then the worker could redeem it and then eat it. So if it's Mishal Shamayim, why in the world would he be able to redeem it? The Torah would never give you a schos. It's something which is usher to you. So the fact that you get it must be, it's Mishalai, it's part of your wages. Says the Gemara, no. Really, you're right. Really, you don't get it. But if you didn't explain to him it was not to Ravai, so that it doesn't look like a Mechach Tayis, we allow you to redeem it. Ema Seifa continues the Mishnah. What does the end of the Mishnah say? If he spread out, the cakes got spread apart, the barrels opened up, he can't eat them. But if he didn't know them, that is already Chiyah Meiser, then the worker will take a Meiser and the Baal Bayis take a Meiser and feed it to them. So what do you take a Meiser for? Torah doesn't give you Isser. Like we said in the Reisha. So you're right, in the case of the figs, they get spread apart. What's the potential of Mekach Tayis if the barrels, the wine casks, became opened up? Made the other, he knows the worker certainly knows That is a chiyuv meiser. Everyone knows that when the barrels open up, you're going to have to take off meiser. So what is the potential mekach tais that could have been? What is the worker's taina in such a scenario? Amar Rav Sheshes, no, the case is Shetzav Chaviyosav Libar. They opened up into a bar, it spilled back into the cistern by the wine press, and therefore the worker had no way of knowing that it was complete wine, and therefore that it had a chiyuv meiser. Ask the Gemara of Tanya, but we learned in a brayse yayin. Mishayeri lebar, once the wine went into the pit, halacha is that it is mechuyav in meiser, so therefore the worker should have known as such. Says no, it's not when it goes into the bar, but rather when you skim off the garbage on the top of the wine. I didn't know. Why do we tell him you should have put in your mind Dilma Mikvah, that maybe it was already skimmed, meaning maybe the wine is complete and there is a chiyuv meiser. Why don't we tell the worker you should have realized that? Explains the Gemara. Ba'asra dahu gavra dinagid ihu mikvah. Place of that guy who is the same person who draws out the wine is the one that skims off the bad part, and therefore wasn't drawn out of the cisterns, the bar. Therefore, he had all the right to assume that there was no chiyuv in meiser. Says the Gemara, but now the Rav Zid taught in the Yeshiva Rav Aisha that says, once it goes into the bar and it skimmed off all the scum from the top, Rav Kiva argues and says, no, it's only when you draw off the foam from the top of the casks. So I feel I could say it's even talking about the bar didn't open up into the bar, but rather the barrels were just opened up like originally thought. But then why do the workers not know that there's a chiyuv in ma'isa? I did not know. I didn't know that the foam was drawn off. Meaning, once we know that there's a machlekes, at what stage the wine is considered complete, and it's a chiyuv meiser, the fact that the barrels are open would not be enough of an indicator for the worker to know that there's necessarily a chiyuv meiser. I've been able to today. Excuse me. Why don't we tell the worker you should have chapped? Says Dilma Mishali. Dilma Mashli. Why don't we tell the worker you should have realized that maybe the foam was taken off? The one that takes off, seals the gas, the one that draws the foam. Therefore, there was no way for the worker to work. So says the Gemara, we still have not brought him a car, found out what is the din, Mishalayhu oichal or Mishal Shamay. Continues the Gemara, 20 lines from the Y lines. The first one line is Disarik. Says the Braisa Koitzeis Adam al Yedei Atzmai. One could stipulate that he's allowed to eat, that his elderly children could eat. Why? Aval. Why? So says the Braisa, it's actually a Mishnah, that you cannot stipulate for Ketanim or anyone else without Das. You can stipulate for Gintailim. Says the Gemara, because what are we talking about right now? We think that the case is that you're feeding all these people. The person is feeding his kids, his wife, etc. He's obligated to support them. So that the worker is the food from Mishal Shamayim. I understand then why he's not allowed to stipulate, because he's obligated to feed these kids, and therefore Mishal Shamayim, he gets food, but it's just for himself, not for them. But if part of his wages is to get this food, why should he not be able to stipulate for Ketanim? He's obligated to feed them, and these are part of his wages. Says the Gemara, he doesn't feed them necessarily. You said even Gedalim, he should be able to stipulate. Says the Gemara, Gedalim Yadim, Gedalim are aware, and they are moichel in their right to eat, and therefore that's how you could explain the Mishnah, but it'll be no raya. Says Gemara, 1 second, but Tani Rav Aishia, 2 lines. So the white lines, you can simply for himself, for his wife, but not for his elderly children. Being simply for the slaves, whether young or old. So says the Gemara in the second wide line, my love, nice. And what's the machlekes? This brisa is arguing with the aforementioned Mishnah. I mean, this brisa Rav Ishia, Timar Savar, that this brisa is holding Mishal Oich, Lumar Sav, the original Mishnah that we call it Mishal Shemayim Oich. So says the Gemara, maybe Gufa, this Mishnah, and this brisa Rav Ishia are arguing whether it's Mishal Oich or Mishal Shemayim. Says the Gemara, Loi. As we can anticipate that the chiluk will be whether you feed them or not. Says the Gemara, B'mayu Kimta, how are you establishing that what? 2 lines to the bottom of Meilam Mezainos. Yachitani Nami Leikotzlo. Do you say something by the Ketanim? Says the Gemara, Tzairayu de Benayu Bita Ketanim Loizachile Rachmana. That due to the tsar of them, therefore, he doesn't have full rishos over them. Says one second, how can you say the Mishnah is talking about that you didn't feed them? And the truth is, this is going to go all the way to Sadi Gimel Marav. Let's stop over here. We'll pick up this last shtickle, differentiate between the Mishnah and the Brisa, whether it's Ma'ilem Zainis or not, in the next year, Mirza Hashem.